Welcome to Empirical Peapod. I'm your host, Tim Day. Thank you so much for being here with me. I don't want to futz about, so let's get into today's show. Did you say a mouse?
I said maybe. There's 3 mice traps in there because I had mice issues before, and then I didn't have any for a while, and then something got eaten in my food, and I told my landlord, I was like, I think the mice are back. But I checked the traps when I got here, and they were empty. So.
Oof.
It wouldn't be dead. They're like live traps.
Sure, but still. All right, anyway.
Do you want me to look and see if we caught a mouse?
No. We've got business to attend to. Welcome to the podcast. I'm talking to one of my close friends, Dr. Melissa Juergens, which is, of course, not your name. What is your actual name?
Mahon.
That's not a thing. I love your husband, but come on. Anyways, thank you for being on here. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me. It's such an honor.
I don't know about that. Well, at least we'll see what you think in an hour. I want to jump right into it. You're part of the overall arching group that comes from Oswego.
That's true.
Where we all started. Where did you end up from Oswego? What was your next step after high school?
Well, after high school, I went to college. I went out to the University of Arizona for a bit.
I forgot that. 'Cause in my head, you went straight to Texas.
No, that's not how that
But
story
you actually
goes.
went to, quote unquote, party it up in Arizona.
Something like that.
How was Arizona?
Arizona was beautiful. It was fantastic.
Really?
Yeah, I actually really loved Arizona. I just had other things going on in my life at the time that led me away from there.
Yeah.
So I ended up in Texas after that.
Now, your family was in Texas.
My family was in Texas.
So they left here, and by here, of course, I mean Illinois.
Yep.
Is that after you graduated high school?
Yeah, they moved pretty much like the minute I graduated high school. So I actually like couch surfed that whole summer because they were already gone.
I see. So what brought you, did just the family bring you to Texas? Like, because you didn't finish, did you do all 4 years in Arizona?
No, so I was only in Arizona for a year, and then I actually graduated college in 3 years. So I went to Texas for 2 more years, and then I came back to Illinois for graduate school.
What an overachiever. Today's theme is going to be the overachiever, Dr. Melissa, and her uncomfortable amount of money. But we'll get to that. Please. So you, in 3 years, so you did 1 year in Arizona and then went to Texas.
That's correct.
And somehow fit 3 more years into 2?
Wait, yes.
Hold on. Also, there's no way you went to school for 3 years because you literally have a PhD.
Well, then I went and got a PhD.
You're already telling fibs.
Right? So I went to undergrad for 3 years, and then I have a doctorate, which was a 5-year program beyond that.
So 8 years.
Yeah.
Now, did you do all of that in Texas?
No. So I graduated with my bachelor's in Texas, and then I moved back home to Illinois, about an hour from where we grew up in Oswego.
Yeah.
And I did all 5 years of my doctorate there in Schaumburg.
Okay. So, and you were on your own that whole time?
Yeah.
Because the family's still in Texas?
Yep. You got it.
So, when you get your PhD, is your PhD in clinical psychology?
You got it right. Yep.
So, how do you go about joining that particular workforce?
So, I'm like, how can I not make this super boring? So basically,
you can summarize for starters.
So basically, it's you do 4 years of school, an internship, and a postdoc. So before you do the internship, you do what's called practicums, which are like mini internships. So you really start practicing psychology after your first year. Okay. And you do that all the way through. So by the time you graduate with your doctorate, you have 4 years of experience under you. They want another year of postdoctorate, you supervised experience, and then you get your license as a clinical psychologist.
Right, but you don't you don't join something, because like right now we're literally in your office. Yes. In your private practice. Yes. Where there may or may not be mice behind me.
I haven't checked the closet today. This is an old Victorian home, and sometimes we get mice.
It is actually a very nice office for sure. But is there anything you had to do, or right out of college, then when you're done with what you're just finished talking about, do you get to go right into private practice then?
You could. I didn't.
Okay.
I worked for a major medical group for almost 10 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. So how long have you have your own little practice then?
I started during COVID, so about 2.5 years.
I got to think that this is more your speed and better.
Yeah.
Quote unquote better, whatever that means. But what did you think of doing the 10 years of the medical psychology?
I mean, it was still clinical psychology. It was just within a major medical group. So there was, pediatrics, OBGYN, and psychology.
Yeah.
So we just had our own section within the major medical practice. But it was different. That is a revenue-driven business.
Like any medical field, in our country at least, it's a business first, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Do you think that was jarring to kind of learn that firsthand? Or did you kind of know that going into it?
I didn't know when I took the job, but I very quickly figured that out.
Yeah.
That it was very much about how many people you could get through.
Right.
And not necessarily about the best interest of the client.
Yeah. So at this point, you've done clinical psychology professionally for 12, 13 years?
Yeah, about somewhere in there.
Now, aside from the clinical psychology, you also do this thing called access bars.
Yeah. So access consciousness is the overarching modality, and access bars is a body process that is one of the first things you learn within the realm of access consciousness. Mm-hmm. And some people just do that, and other people go on to do other classes and kind of create more of a lifestyle of using the tools.
Right, which we've already talked about, overachiever.
Yeah.
So you like to use all the tools and drive all the revenue. Now this is different because it's interesting because it's not revenue based per se.
No.
Like, do you find I think psychology is incredible, obviously, and very important, especially as we're growing more conscious of our mental stability as a society. Do you think that having it be money-centric is a problem? Like, of course, everybody has to make money, right? Everybody has to make a living. And anything you provide, you should be compensated for to whatever you value your time as. But do you think that as not the sole goal, but the main focus is problematic? Or do you think it still opens up the floor to be a positive thing?
Well, I think where it's hard is that to be a clinical psychologist, it's a lot of school and it's a huge student loan.
Right.
So unless you come through the door with $200,000 in your pocket, you have large loans that you pay on every month.
Right.
So the major problem, in my personal opinion, in the country is that most psychologists at this point are either insurance-based, mm-hmm. which I am, sure. And what the insurance compensates psychologists hasn't really changed in the last 20 years.
Right.
So even though inflation continues to go up, nobody's really getting paid anymore.
Well, also the idea of what is a mental condition and should be seen as a psychologist versus like what isn't. Because I feel like that's evolved insanely over the last 30 years. As far as like, usually we would just be like, hey, stop it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, this is an actual thing that we actually have to treat and talk about and try to work through.
Right. So, I think that's where some of the issue lies. A lot of psychologists today are not taking insurance anymore for that reason.
Really?
Which is understandable, and I only take certain insurances for that reason.
Yeah.
But I still continue to accept insurance. But I know a lot of people are moving away from that so that they can charge more. And I don't think that it's an asshole-ish move.
Right.
It's really to survive.
Sure.
And at the level, if you're making a certain amount of money and what it costs to live is a certain space, but what it costs to live goes up, but your revenue doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, now you have a mortgage that you bought under a different pretense.
Right.
And so, all of that changes things. So I think that where I found difficulty within like working for the major medical group was that they were so revenue driven that when I had so many clients coming in that I truly couldn't see, like I would have a new client and I couldn't get them in again for a month after their first session. That's just not good quality of care.
Right.
And I would ask to close my practice, essentially meaning I couldn't take on new clients until I actually had places to put people again. And I was denied that over and over again.
Wow.
And so I was never, the entire time I worked there, I was never allowed to close my practice, meaning I didn't take on new clients. So at one point I counted and I had 400 open clients.
That's insane.
It is. So I haven't done the math recently, but my guess is right now I have more like 40 open clients, which is a lot more manageable. I don't see everybody weekly. A lot of people I see every 2 weeks or once a month because they get better now. And so as they get better, we kind of space out how often they're seen. And now I can get more people in, but it's much more of a ethical and I don't even know the word I'm looking for. Like it's a practice now that I'm like proud of.
Yeah.
You know, where like people are actually coming through, they start to get better. They start weekly, they taper down to every other week, they taper down to once a month, and ultimately they sort of move on because their lives have improved so much.
So I think the important key word there is better, because like I think in a general sense that we kind of look at insurance, at least I look at insurance in general as problematic in the sense that everything you want to be sustainable, because if it's a business, you want customers.
Right.
You don't want to fix anything because then they're not coming back. So it almost seems like that's why we're very pill driven.
Yep.
And even I know in psychiatry is very pill driven and stuff like that. And I think we've gotten so used to that's what overall that's what people want, right? Like just give me a pill so I can get on with my life, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like working in that psychological environment for so long was more, let's sustain what we're doing to build a clientele, to build revenue? You're talking 400 open cases, or patients. That's insane.
It was insane.
Yeah, not to have 40. I'm also curious then too, because you're getting X amount of money to work there versus private practice. Is private practice, you have 1/10 of the people, is it as lucrative?
I would say yes. If I wanted to work more hours,
sure,
it would be equal. But given where I'm at and what I'm doing, and I've found a way business-wise to continue to make more revenue in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I pay myself. You know, I actually collect a paycheck from my business to me, the person, and it's pretty much what I used to make there.
Nice.
So it's definitely, and now I get to create my life, right? So if I,
so your life to work balance is 100% controlled by you now.
Yeah,
which is huge.
It's amazing. I mean, one of the things I look at now is it's like if I want to take a long weekend, take a day off, take a week off, that's great. One of the reasons that I left in the end, I mean, there was a lot of reasons, right? This was building over years. Yeah. But when I ultimately left that practice or the medical group, it was mostly because my access consciousness business was growing and becoming a bigger priority to me. Mm-hmm. And I was working for another facilitator at the time, and somebody that I had immensely looked up to. And at that, I mean, we're friends now, but at that point to be working for her was such a privilege. And she had weekly meetings on Thursdays at 1:00, right? And so I asked the boss at the time, like, hey, I just need this hour off, to not see clients at this time. And I had asked for something else, I don't remember, a couple of months prior. And she said, well, can you promise me that this will be the last time you ever change your schedule?
Wow.
And I said no.
Yeah.
And it was that day that I was like, I have to leave. Because my life feels very limited and what I can actually choose working for somebody else.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Now, I know it's really hard to explain this in any kind of tangible way, but what is the access consciousness like?
So access consciousness is a personal development modality. In short. It's energy work. It works with energy. If you've ever heard of Reiki or
I presume it gets compared to Reiki often.
it does.
Now,
It's totally different.
Yeah, I've done it. Is the only reason I know that.
Yeah.
But like, how would you explain the subtleties and the huge differences between the two?
Sure. So Reiki is calling on the Reiki energy and pulling it into somebody's body, essentially. In short, right? There's a lot more to this.
Absolutely.
But, and access bars, and most of the work of access consciousness is actually clearing everything out that doesn't belong to you, that isn't you.
Right.
So any practice within access is never pulling something in so much as it is releasing everything that isn't you.
Yeah. Now, gets interesting with energy work because we subconsciously hold on to a lot, right?
Yeah.
And we
absolutely.
take on a lot of extra bullshit that is heavy.
Yeah.
So it is quite a huge difference to think, okay, this is releasing as opposed to like pulling in and kind of cleansing from the inside out. Now, what I'm curious in is the idea of being a clinical psychologist that's highly educated and really good at your job and have your own private practice versus doing energy work that's a quote-unquote pseudoscience.
Right.
Do you think those two things conflict with each other?
The thing is I think some people might, but to me, they're the greatest contribution to each other.
Yeah.
Because I have clients that come in, and now you see how people are, right?
Sure.
You see how if I don't think I have any right now because I just did an expo over the weekend, but often I'll have brochures about access bars just sitting out in the waiting room.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes in with one in their hand and they're like, hey, can you tell me about this? That opens a conversation. I have crystals in my office. Crystals have nothing to do with access consciousness.
Sure.
However,
the crystals are amazing. That's why
Right.
the energy feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
And so even though crystals have nothing to do with access consciousness, it does have an energy to them. And often people who are like, oh, I like your amethyst or your fluorite.
Yeah.
I know that they've at least dabbled somewhat in an energy field.
Well, they're open to it. I think, too, some
Right.
people get caught up in the word energy because they don't necessarily feel that.
Right.
So what I've been trying to pivot to lately is vibration.
That's great.
Because we know that the world's made of atoms, and atoms vibrate to exist,
Yep.
which means everything has a vibration.
Well, everything has energy.
It's the exact same thing. The vibration is what creates the energy. That's why everything has energy.
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, Einstein talked about energy. So,
Right.
Often when people say things like, my oldest son the other day said, somebody he knew was like, oh, she's like you. She believes in energy. And I was like, what an interesting concept. Believe in energy. I'm pretty sure energy is just a constant.
No, only you weirdos believe in energy.
Right? So I was like, that's funny. But yeah, actually, I've really found that, with the people that are open to it, it's a huge contribution.
Yeah.
I will run bars with clients, which are 32 points on the head that just, like, when lightly touched, just releases stuff, right? Like we're talking about, releases all the stuck energy. So I have clients that I do that with. I also just use the tools. There's a lot of, verbal tools of access consciousness that I teach a lot of clients, and the people that are really open to hearing that stuff are the people that I see the most change with.
Right.
They're the people who've gotten better, whatever that means exactly, but if they're coming in for depression, anxiety, OCD, anything else sort of in that realm, when I've also combined the tools of access consciousness, those are the people that I've seen have the most progress, make the most change. And I've really seen people who were pretty stuck when they got here, were in and out of the mental hospitals and had lots of treatment, lots of intensive treatment. Mm-hmm. And once we started using these tools are the things that now they haven't gone back in years and are actually off medication and are thriving.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've really seen the tools of access consciousness create so much more change than psychology alone.
I love the idea of kind of seeing, because we're still in the infancy of even psychology being taken seriously.
Sure.
And to see kind of where the holes in psychology are, this whole new practice coming in and kind of filling those holes. Because to me, they work in tandem. Like they're not separate. I understand that as a whole, we're not there yet. But being part of an infancy of it is awesome. And I've done the access bars. So I know what it's like. Now there's a step up from that.
Yeah.
Which is called SOP.
Yeah. So SOP stands for Symphony of Possibilities.
Sure.
Which is you're right. It's a higher level class within Access Consciousness.
Because it's a whole body thing now.
Yeah. So there's actually Access is huge. So we have
Right.
tons of different areas. There's we talk about there's what's called X-Men, which is talking about like autism, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, things like that.
I get so excited whenever you go live talking about X-Men because I'm always thinking of comic books.
Well, that's the idea.
And so far, you've never talked about comic books.
That's funny. But the idea is like knowing that like you're actually everything you think is wrong about you is actually a capacity and a strength.
Right.
So that is the X-Men specialty. I'll try not to veer too far that way. But so, I mean, there's all these specialties. There's talk to the entities, which is, talking to ghosts, spirits, whatever you call that.
Sure.
There's Joy of Business, which is talking about all the business pieces. There's called Right Riches for You, which is all the money stuff. I'm going to forget 100. But there's Conscious Parents, Conscious Kids. There's Talk to the Animals. There's like so many different. There's Conscious Horse, Conscious Rider is a whole area where people who love horses.
Yeah.
And so there's all these different specialty areas, but the body work alone, there's actually body processes, which are hands-on, like holding your hands on a body. Mm-hmm. And then there's what you described as Symphony of Possibilities, which is mostly off of the body. And it's a little bit on the body, kind of, it's really, really following the energy.
I say it depends on how the energy's flowing, right?
But it very much is, it's following the energy of what that person's being is really requiring at that time. And it's one of those things that's probably the hardest for me to talk about because it is so energetic and it really is being very present with energy and moving and changing the molecules to create something greater, but it's like bringing out the you that you are.
Right. Now, with your permission, I'd like to, because I've done that a bunch.
Yeah.
And I really, really love that and do think that it's changed tons of things for me. And I can point to specific iterations of that. And because you've seen my energy when I started versus every time we met up, like every 6 months to a year after. And normally not as a rule, but normally you don't talk about what happens in a session, and it's not something that you like get deep into.
Right.
You just let it be what it is, and that manifests for you however that manifests for you, and you get whatever you need out of that. But again, with your permission, can you speak to some of the things that you dealt with while we were doing one? Some of the things that came up, some of the things you felt, how the energy worked. And just kind of explain a little more in depth of what those processes look like behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, I could try.
I know there was some weird stuff happening.
So, I mean, this is more personal about you.
Yeah, no,
okay?
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, so, I mean, when we started, there was just a lot of, like, sort of blockages, right? Yeah. And...
'cause I was pretty depressed. I was working... with a pretty severe sugar addiction has kind of been a crux for me for most of my life. And those were the main things that I felt were kind of holding me back versus when I got down on the table and what you saw or what came up with you.
Yeah, I mean, there was all sorts of different things that popped. And going back there, I'm like trying to get present with what that looked like. One of the things I remember the most is that there was this joy that just was radiating from your feet, which is just sort of funny, right?
Yeah.
But it was sort of like, I was like, can you let the rest of your body know that there's still joy here? You know? And so, but it's like, those are things we put up so many walls and barriers.
Sure.
To having us, because at some point, most of us have decided we're wrong, we're bad, we're too fucked up, we're too, all the things that we make really wrong about us. And so we start to close doors and shut things down and energetically.
Yeah. Also, if I could just throw in there, even like, because I talk like that in jest, saying that stuff out loud makes your body believe it.
Well, absolutely. And, well, whether you say it out loud or you think it in your head.
Well, sure, yeah. It's
right?
the same.
So,
it's still in you.
Right. And so all of that stuff, I mean, there was just a lot of stuff locked. And the more we... spent time even in that first session, I started to feel it unlock and then it would kind of close again. It would unlock and then close. It wasn't quite moving. And it was, and I find this with a lot of people. By the end of session, it sort of starts to move.
Right.
And, I think when I saw you the next time, it was so clear that something had shifted.
Sure.
And, I'm trying to remember, I was aware of a intensity in your heart area. I was aware of some anxieties, things like that, where it was just kind of intense in like your upper body. And then by the time I saw you next, it still took a little while, but it was moving a lot faster. It didn't take me, 45 minutes to feel like there was energy movement, and there was a lot more lightness in your world. And I'm sure there was some sessions in between there, but I think the last time we did a session, I was like, whoa, like there is so much change now, and there is so much lightness that it was so clear to me how much you had stepped more into being you, and let go of so much of like the stuck stuff that didn't belong to you, that you were holding on dearly to.
Like even when I walked in the door, because we hadn't seen each other in like 6 or 8 months, and just walking in the door, you're like, holy shit! Like your whole energy signature is different.
Yeah, it was really different.
That was before we even like got into any actual work.
That's true.
Yeah, so it was crazy. Now, and I liked that a lot, which was it was a really cool experience. But and those sessions I did were an hour. Just out of curiosity, and everybody has to decide what is worth what to them. How much does stereotypically something like an hour session of SOP cost?
It depends on who your practitioner is.
100%, sure. But like, what's a range that like you would charge?
I charge $300 for the hour.
Okay, and then the access bars, which is just the head work. How many points did you say?
There's 32 points on the head.
32 points on the head. And how much? That's usually like a half hour.
No, it's an hour.
Oh, it's an hour as well. Okay.
Yeah, so I charge $150.
And the SOP can be shorter or longer also.
And bars can be shorter or longer also.
Sure.
My standard is an hour. And everybody charges different amounts. I know people who charge a lot more than that.
Right.
And I know people who charge a bit less.
Now, what I'm curious, though, is those things aren't necessarily, or maybe they are, covered by insurance.
No.
Right.
They're not.
Do you find that frustrating because they're so much more helpful?
Well, what's interesting is, we're not there yet. We're actually in the middle of getting a study going, because they have found that some energy work is starting to be covered by insurance. So we're actually in the process of changing that.
That's awesome. That's really cool for everybody.
Yeah.
So, if you weren't a practitioner, does $300 sound like a lot for you to invest into yourself for an hour? Like, do you get your nails done?
I do.
And how much does it cost to get a mani-pedi?
A mani-pedi? Probably $80.
Right. And some people are like, that's too much to spend on myself for the week.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because I firmly believe that part of self-care, this is different than being like, I can't afford that because I won't eat otherwise.
Right.
Or I can't feed my kids. But I mean, like, to quote a wonderful show, treat yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's, a very important piece of mental health. And you can't really put a price on mental stability and breaking through these things.
What's interesting about a lot of the work that I do is mental stability is like step one.
Right.
Mental stability, that's why people come to me as a psychologist.
Sure.
But my real target for people is, of course, to get them stable.
Yeah.
But beyond that is to get to the space where they're thriving, where they can have anything and everything they'd really like to have as their life. And that's what the tools of access really are about. Psychology, there is a body of work called positive psychology, which was more about thrival than just survival. But other than that, psychology really is the practice of, fixing what's wrong with you.
Right.
But we get into something like energy work and the work that Access Consciousness does, and it's really about getting way beyond survival. Of course we want survival, but it's more about, like, how can you live the life you'd really like to live?
Yeah.
And the sky's the limit. Even when we look at, like, what we think having a great life is, we're still looking at everybody else for a reference point of what a great life really looks like. And one of the things, sorry, did you want to say something?
No, I was intently listening.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, one of the things with
I'll
that,
interrupt you if I
you
need
can
to.
interrupt me as much as you want.
It's my show.
It's true. It is your show. I'm just here.
Right. When I was on your show, it was fine, but now you're on my show.
Right? Tim's world. I'm just living in it. So, yeah, I mean, it really is about, like, really having anything that you'd like to have, even beyond what you think is on the menu of what you can choose, and really looking. I mean, one of the things I look at with people is, like, if you could have anything as your life, like, not what your neighbor is doing, not what your best friend is doing, not what, you know, the celebrity on the TV is doing. Yeah. Like, what is it that you'd really like to have as your life? What would light you up? What energies are you asking for in your life? And pulling into that, because that's actually where you start to, like, truly live.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I have a podcast, which you just mentioned, called Wild Enthusiasm for Living.
I did an episode.
But you did. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But that's really the target, is to wake up every day with a wild enthusiasm for living.
Right.
And, you know, it's funny as we talk about this. I mean, I can go on about this forever, about just how much it's changed my own life. But, like, I woke up this morning and I knew I had a full day of meetings. I had a ton of stuff today. Today might be the most packed day I've had in a while. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for today. And I was like, oh my God, I did it. Like, this was like the one target I've had, is to, like, wake up excited for the day ahead. When it's not like I'm not leaving for a vacation today. I don't have, you know, there's not like something happening today. Yeah. But I woke up today, like, excited for my life. And I was like, whoa, that's so cool.
That is cool. I mean, that's still tied to, like, you know, intention and work is play and all these various ideas that we throw around, which are easy to throw around, but that's not necessarily easy to live. Yeah. So when you kind of wake up and realize you're living that, it's like, oh, I made it. Awesome.
Right? And I mean, the thing is, even when we have a day like that, it's so easy to be like, well, tomorrow won't be like that. You know? So it's like where you really start to, you know, intentionally choose your life in 10-second increments of, you know, every 10 seconds, like, okay, what can I choose now? You know, what can I choose now that would create joy, that would create the energy that I'd like my life to be in 5 years? You know, something I was looking at with a client this week, I don't even remember who now, but I remember the conversation was, you know, we were talking about, like, okay, well, what would you like your life to be like 5 years from now? Well, what choices can you make today to create that future that you're asking for? You know, and so this is some of the kinds of conversations and work I do with people.
Yeah. I think it's also important to add, like, of course, life ebbs and flows. There's ups and downs.
Absolutely.
But the focus is still there. And it's, I think as you take this path, you become less stuck. Yeah. While it's ebbing and flowing, and you still remain, oh, I'm still pushing forward. I can feel less today, but I'm still moving forward.
Well, that's the thing. So, like, the tagline of Access Consciousness, the mantra, if you will, is all of life comes to me with ease, joy, and glory. Right. So that's not everything will be easy all the time.
Sure, and that's an important distinction.
It is. Ease is not the same as easy.
Yeah. One of the things, like, when I was doing the trauma recovery and stuff too with clients, do you ever run into this idea of, like, people will come and do one, and you're like, this is not a magic fix, right? Where you do one session and you're done. Yeah. This is a process, and there's so much to wade through. Like, you don't even know your bullshit until you open it up and look, and then you're like, oh, there's no way this is going to be cleared in a day. Right. It's a process, and then it's maintaining that process after you're comfortable enough to go back.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And there's definitely people that come in for one session and that's all they ever do, and that's totally fine. Sure. But, you know, that's their choice. Yeah. But yeah, when people are looking for a quick fix, it's the same energy as looking for a pill. Right. Right?
Exactly. So this is not some magic thing where it's like, oh, we'll just rub our hands around somebody and then send them on their way and they're fixed. Right. Yeah. No. This is work just like anything else, and it's focused individual work. And you're either up for it or you're not. But you know,
right. Well, there's a level of choice involved, and, like, I don't love the, like, do the work thing, but just because I don't like the word work, because everybody has a negative connotation with it. But there is a choice involved to continue to choose towards the energy that creates your life. Yeah. And if you do it once, and you're like, oh, well, that I didn't feel anything, or that didn't do anything. That's like, well. And there are people who have one bar session. You know, the co-creator of Access Consciousness, Dr. Dane here, you know, was suicidal, had a date planned, to kill himself, and he, after his first bar session, he got up and off the table and was like, oh my God, has it always been this beautiful here?
Right.
So, I mean, there are definitely people that have a session. Now, he wasn't like, all right, done with that.
Yeah.
You know, he's gone on to create, you know, his career with Access Consciousness and does more and more every day. But there are certainly people who have a miraculous experience, but it doesn't mean that that's it and that's over and that's all there is. You know, it's always about continuing on any journey.
Sure.
To follow it, you know, to keep going and asking for more.
Which makes sense. They like there's the old what are they called? I'm gonna butcher however it's pronounced, but koans from like Zen and Buddhist ideas where they're like these. It means like question answer, and they're like these cute stories that or like riddles, and they're designed to awaken your brain immediately. And for some people they do, and some people they don't. And it's kind of the same idea. I also wonder if it's like if you're so close to the edge, if it's an easier trigger to kind of just awaken like that. Now, what I also wanted to touch on real quick, just because it's an insane story, and it gets me emotional even hearing about it. You have 3 kids.
I do.
And how old is your oldest kid?
24.
24. Now, you adopted this kid, right?
I did.
Joe.
Joe.
He's got a name. Let's not be weird. How did Joe come into your life?
Joe is a kid that I knew from the time he was younger. And he was a kid in the foster system. Mm-hmm. And when he got a full ride to college. Kids in the foster system in Illinois, if their grades are at a certain level, can get a scholarship to get a full ride to college. So he got the scholarship, and when it came time to go, his parents at the time wouldn't sign the paperwork. So
is it why? Like I don't understand.
That's all.
Whatever.
Whole other bag of worms.
Sure.
So
some people suck.
Some people suck. So ultimately, he needed an adult that like knew him to vouch for him. So I wrote a letter for him, and so that he could go to college. And he just kind of came into our life. Like he started hanging out. He was couch surfing at the time. So, I was like, hey, like if you want a place to stay, my husband and I took him down to college when he went. And then, we had said, you're welcome to come stay with us over breaks. At that point, he hadn't stayed with us yet. And he reached out around Christmas, and we were kind of in contact.
Right.
And he said, did you mean what you said? Like, can I come stay with you? And we were like, yeah. So he did. And through the rest of college, all of his breaks were spent with us. And then we got to a point where he was going to lose insurance. He would have been put on, public aid. So we said, we can adopt you legally if you'd like to do that. I know how you feel about family, but
right.
we love you. We'd love to have you if you would like to do that. And so we did. We went to court and we legally adopted him. So when he was 20 years old, he became my son. And now I have 3 boys, and he is thriving. He has a great job. Up north, actually, he's so fun. He lives down the street from where I went to grad school. So
really?
He lives walking distance to the bar that I spent all of grad school at.
That's hilarious.
So my husband and I went with him the other night, and it was so fun. It was so nostalgic for me because it was like where I spent my early 20s, which is, where he's at now.
Yeah.
So same age, he's living in the same place that I lived at that point.
That's funny.
And
now, it's interesting to me, too, because it's not... I would hesitate to say that the system failed him per se, but it definitely didn't feel like it had his best interests at heart.
I mean, the best part of the system was the free ride to college.
Right. Which is, realistically, I guess all you can hope for.
Yeah. So
how did he get away from his foster parents that refused to sign the paperwork? He just kind of aged out of it?
Well, he aged out, and they, for all intents and purposes, kicked him out.
Right.
And so that's how that went. Yeah.
How did you initially meet him? Was he were you seeing him as a patient or just whatever?
He was just in my world.
Interesting. Now, the real reason I brought you here today is because I like to make fun of you a lot because you're rich. Now, you're not actually rich, but to me, you're rich. Now, I know to you, you live in this circle out here where you're probably the low person on the totem pole. And you also have, like, you go live and you do stuff, and you had just mentioned even some of the access stuff was money centric.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because you and I have extremely different philosophies about money.
Yeah.
It's probably why you have some and I don't.
That's probably true.
What is, because I don't think that you're controlled by money, and I don't think that you're an asshole about money. Like we were just talking about the medical system and how it's kind of money centric. But obviously everybody needs to make a living, and you want to live as comfortably as possible. So in your world, like, what is the goal? Like, what do you look at money as? Is it just a facilitator? And what is the ultimate goal as far as, like, balance? Like, where's the end point?
Yeah, there isn't one. So
You just want all the money.
well, it's not that. So a question that really got me is, can you change the world more with money or without money?
Right.
And so I'm willing to have money, and I would sure like a lot more than I have now,
Now,
so that I can change the world.
Even that
more.
was just an interesting sentence. I'm willing to have money.
Yeah, a lot of people are not.
No, so, like, well, yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that is a whole, like, I've never heard you say that, or at least I've never paid attention enough to hear that. It's so mind-blowing because it's such a simple throwaway sentence. But it's like, yeah, because like I just said, our philosophies are different. And it's almost like I go out of my way to avoid money because of negative connotations.
You bet.
And kind of flipping that whole idea and being like, oh, I'm willing to have it, and it's not going to bring any of its bullshit with it. I'm going to use it for something greater than itself.
Well, it's interesting that you even say, like, it's bullshit. Like, money has bullshit. Money itself, money is just money.
It's literally just like paper.
Money is just energy.
Right.
And so, but what happens is from the time we're little kids, I would venture to say even before that, past lifetimes, etc., depending on your points of view, is that money gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
Like, we were taught by our parents, by everybody in our lives, that money is the root of all evil. You can think of all the things people say about money, that money is bad, people with money.
Changes people, right?
Right, absolutely. And so, but if that's your point of view, then that's just something you're sticking on to money. But money itself, money doesn't have a point of view. Money is just energy. Sure. So it's all about your point of view about it.
Yeah.
That's what creates what you do or don't have in your life.
Yeah.
And so, like, to your point, like, willingness to have money is like, hey, like, I actually love money, but most people hate money.
Well, even just saying that out loud, it's like, ugh.
Right.
Because it makes everybody just heard you say that is like, this bitch loves money.
I know. And it's so wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Stereotypically, sure.
Sure. And so it's like the willingness to, and trust me, this took me the longest time to get to. Because I used to say, God, when I was in grad school, I had no money. I mean, I would cry. The bills were sitting there that I couldn't pay.
Yeah.
And my parents wouldn't help me. The year they put a pool in, I was in so much debt. And I was like, you bitches just spent all this money on a pool, and I'm sitting here crying because I can't pay my freaking electric bill.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's not like, oh, I've always had money. I've always loved money. That's not true. I had nothing.
Also, not for nothing, like, I know I'm taking the piss, but we just covered your journey. Like, you've worked your ass off to get to where you are, and you've built a practice. You put, like, yourself through school and everything like that.
Well, yeah.
Like, that's impressive.
Well, and that's part of the story, right? But it's not the whole story.
No, not at all.
And so, I mean, I know lots of people who work their ass off to go through school and still don't have money. Yeah. And I know
a lot of people put their ass through school and then didn't use their degree at all.
I do too. And I know a lot of people who didn't go to school at all who have lots of money.
Right.
So, I mean, I definitely think it's all relative. But, you know, I mean, on the topic of, you know, I hated money. I hated money.
Yeah.
It's like, money is the problem. If money wasn't a thing, my life would be great. Money is awful. But when you have those points of view, you actually uninvite money into your life.
Right.
And so, because it's like, you know, there's sort of a tagline, like, if money was a party, or if your life was a party, would money want to come? But if you think about, like, if money shows up at your door and you're like, there's never enough of you,
Right.
why didn't you bring your friends?
Sure.
God, like, I hate that you're here. You fucking suck.
Yeah.
Like, is money going to hang out at that party?
That's how I feel at every party I go to. But you're right. I don't enjoy it.
Right. So is money going to invite its friends? Be like, this party's awesome. Come play. And I know it's sort of ironic to talk about money as though it's a person at your doorstep.
Yeah. Well, but realistically, if you want something to be different, you got to look at it differently.
Absolutely. Where if you're grateful for everything that shows up, I mean, I do lots of talks about this. If you're grateful for every, dollar you get, every dime you find on the ground, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this money. It's amazing. What would it take for even more of this to show up? It starts to change the energy where you're actually inviting more in because your natural state is abundance.
Right.
You are part of the planet. Sure. If you walk outside and go find yourself a sidewalk crack, unless it's been heavily manicured, you will find little seedlings and little even my back porch out here always has all this foliage growing in the sidewalk cracks.
Right.
Because it's men meaning people, come in and concrete over things and move things and change things, but anything that people haven't touched naturally starts getting overgrown,
right?
And with abundance of nature. But that's our natural state also.
Well, because I think that we work really hard to separate ourselves from nature.
Absolutely.
Which I also don't think that we're in a shift on that like other things, but I think people like us, we don't separate ourselves from the consciousness and like the reality of what the world is, the universe.
Absolutely.
We're just another piece of it. We happen to be able to use our eyes and brains as an aperture to look at it, but we're not different from it.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And so, I mean, if you see that as any kind of indication of what's actually true for us, like, you naturally are an abundant being. You're money naturally is in your world. We actually have to work hard to not have it.
Yeah.
But it's with our points of view.
Sure.
That actually sort of keep it out. So, I mean, I could talk about money forever, but I mean, that's kind of
it's an interesting shift for me, just the simplicity of I'm willing to have money.
Yeah.
Like this idea of like, if nobody else wants it, I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it works.
Like everybody else is talking shit about it, I'll just hold on to it.
Yeah.
And use it as I see fit. Where did that kind of come from, that idea?
I'm truly access consciousness.
It's all stemmed from the kind of the same idea of what you've been doing how long have you been doing access conscious?
Since the end of 2018. So not quite 5 years.
Yeah. You know what I wanted to touch on too, actually, I was curious. So we talked about kind of the pricing. Now, you said you just did an expo. Mm-hmm. What is that?
So, I mean, there's all sorts of different things, but there's all these like mind, body, spirit expos maybe people have heard of. That wasn't this. This was actually part of Swedish Days. But there's lots of different ones where, I mostly do either like natural living, healthy something, or like the metaphysical kind of expos where people are selling all sorts of different things. There's psychic readers, there's people doing Reiki or craniosacral or other energy works, and I'll usually just do access bars at those. I don't do all the other stuff.
Do you have a line? Like, I'm curious just personally if, because clinical psychologist, highly educated, access bars, energy work, psychic readings.
Yeah.
Do you have a point where you're like, all right, I like my energy work, but this is a little too much? Or do you kind of just feel that you're like, if it's all energy based, there's room and there's a place for all of it, and it all is what it is?
Well, I mean, one of the things is like when we talk about consciousness includes everything and judges nothing.
Right.
So I'm not necessarily there to decide everything else is less than what I do. It's different. I've done a lot of different things. I've tried a lot of different modalities before I got to Access. I was doing other things. I've been, training Reiki and psychic intuitive stuff and all sorts of other things, right? And I've seen the most change using Access, which is why that's what I do. But that's not to poo-poo at anything else.
Right, yeah.
Everybody else has their own experience, and if they love what they do, that's amazing. And that's just not the thing that I sort of stuck with.
Right. Now, you also do where you are, I don't know what they're called or how it works exactly, so I'm going to trip my way through this. You're a facilitator.
Yeah.
Where you will go and, like, for a weekend, like a day on a weekend, and bring people in and teach them how to do access bars.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you teach them also? You don't teach the SOP, just the access
No,
bars.
only Dr. Dane here teaches SOP, and now Dr. Anthony Mattis also does teach some
Okay,
of the
so
SOP.
you're allowed to do it, but you cannot facilitate.
That's true.
Now, when typically if you're facilitating the access bars, like how many people would usually be in a class at once?
It depends on the person, the facilitator, the area, lots
Yeah.
of things.
Just in a general sense.
For
None of us are going
me,
to check.
I mean, for me personally, I would say an average class is anywhere between 4 and 10 people.
Yeah.
I know there's facilitators in other parts of the world that'll have 100-person classes.
Right, which is insane to think about.
Sure.
Because like, it feels, some people I'm sure can make 100 feel small and intimate, but 4 to 10 seems more manageable. Now, because if I remember correctly, if you go through an access bar session X amount of times, you have enough of a knowledge of it to be able to practice it.
So you only have to do the 1-day class
Right.
in order to practice. You're a practitioner after the 1-day class. So
Okay.
after an 8-hour class, you can go out and practice. Once
Yeah.
you've taken 3 classes with 3 different facilitators, you can teach it.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So how much does something like that run to be part of the facilitators a full day just to get the one class under your belt?
The 1-day class is $350.
Okay. Because I'm curious. What I'm trying to do is, in my head, just to kind of be like, okay, so if you see a couple people a week here and there, and you facilitate even like just twice a month, I'm like, 10 people times $250. Like, God, it is lucrative.
Well, it absolutely is. And Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, designed it as such.
Right.
And so, I mean, he wanted us to go out there and change the world with this stuff.
Yeah.
And part of that is the willingness to make some money on it.
Right.
And also to have it be able to have other people want to facilitate it.
Yeah.
The more people who are teaching classes and this stuff, the more people are doing it.
Right.
And the greater the world becomes.
Yeah. It's interesting to me, and I'm kind of working out some shit in my brain while trying to do this show and make it compelling. Just because, because Jay and we talked the other day, and you'll hear on his episode too. We were talking about money because I think we kind of come from a similar idea where everything should be free,
Right.
which is silly. And it's like we just talked about, pushing money away. And then when he started doing certain things, it was like, okay, but I'm creating something and giving you something that adds value to what you're doing.
Right.
And realistically, it costs me money to facilitate that or to get here or to do things. So I have to value in whatever I value my own time at as well. And the history of learning that and stuff like that. And it's like, because it's almost like what we're talking about. The shift happened when I was talking to Jay. At least the door opened. And then what we're talking about right now is the shift in my whole philosophy of how I've thought about money so far my whole life, which is blowing my mind right now while I'm trying to maintain my composure and do this.
Well, that's amazing. I want to add, too, just on that, if somebody's interested in taking a bars class, it is $350 in the United States. If this is listened to in other countries, sometimes there's country pricing.
Sure.
And once you've taken one class ever, it actually drops to half price.
Oh, nice.
So it's $175 thereafter.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to take 3 classes to facilitate it, it's $350 the first time and then $175 the second 2. So it's really only, what is that, $700 as an investment.
And then you can
teach.
Yeah.
And if that's fun for you, and it's not everybody wants to teach it.
No,
but
I don't have a desire to teach it. I'm also more interested in the SOP, which nobody's allowed to do.
That's not true at all. You can absolutely do it. You just have to take a class.
It's almost like I don't listen. I just kind of decide what I think.
Right. So that's all interesting.
Do you have a website for your?
I do. It's Dr. So Dr. Melissa Mahon. So it's Dr. Melissa and then Mahon.
Yeah, hearing the word
I know.
Mahon is impossible.
I know. I just say man to most people, but
Yeah.
because I'm doing this, I guess I'm
I gotta think
pronouncing
a
it
lot of-
appropriately.
I presume a lot of people say Mahon or
They
Mahon.
do. They say Mahon and Mahon. I just say man for all intents and purposes. So anyways, it's Dr. Melissa, Mahon.com.
What we'll do is just call Mike Juergens.
Yeah, there you go. Every time you say Jurgens, it's so weird to me. Obviously, if you guys haven't picked up, that's my maiden name, but it's such an awkward thing because I haven't been Jurgens for
Yeah, you guys have been married forever, right? Yeah.
13 years we've been married.
And I don't mean that any disrespectfully, not to make it Mike's amazing.
Oh,
but that's how I've always known you. I do the same thing to my sister, for Christ's sake.
No, I don't think he would be offended at all. It's just strange to me.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever hear that anymore.
Yeah, not that anybody could figure out how to spell Jurgens.
Right? That was a weird spelling, too.
You've just gone from one horrible,
I
impossible
know,
name to another.
It's so true.
So what happens next?
Well, I'm working on growing a lot of things.
You even mentioned to me this week, which I, again, appreciate you finding some time to fit this in, that it's been hectic as hell recently because things are happening so fast.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing. I actually have a class coming up. There's no prereqs if anybody's interested, and I don't know when this will go out to the world, but
oh man,
right? But I called Surfing the Tsunami, which is the energy of when everything's happening really fast. There's a lot of change going on. How do you surf it? How do you manage it? How do you have fun with it? Rather than being knocked over by it. But I mean,
also that side note, because you have so much going on and you're constantly doing things. Can we do you have a specific, like, not a newsletter, like, can we follow you on Facebook or somewhere where we can keep track of all that you have going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Instagram or Facebook. I mean, you can find me on all of the things.
And it was Dr. Melissa Mahon.
Uh-huh.
I said it wrong.
No, you're great. .com. And on my Instagram, it's the same thing. It's Dr._Melissa_man.
Yeah.
And so you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook.
I'll try to spell it because I have to write a description.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can link anything, but I'll try to at least spell it out so somebody can be like, oh.
Yeah. No, you should be able to find me on all the platforms and on my website also. You'll certainly see all my upcoming things.
Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to.
No, you're great. What was the question? Oh, what's happening next? Yeah, a million things. I mean, in my private practice, I have students starting. So.
Students starting?
Yeah. So August 2nd, I have 3 students starting. So that's people who are coming to learn from me.
Oh, nice.
So as they're budding therapists, 2 of which are budding psychologists, and 1 is a budding clinical counselor or something like that. So I'll have them starting here. So my practice is, growing. As far as all the access stuff, I have classes that I do around the country and world, and and I do a lot of classes locally here at my house in Batavia, and then I definitely travel to do classes also. So if you can certainly check out all the upcoming things.
That is a lot of stuff. How about personally? Is there something growth-wise that you're working on, or do you kind of just let things happen as they happen and just let yourself be in tune with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always personal things I'm working towards. I mean, for me, it's like clearing energetic blocks to growing my business. Sometimes there's stuck stuff where I would really like more people in classes, or I mean, things like that.
So we even talked about, because we had dinner a while back, and I had mentioned kind of a way to reach out bigger, and less typical.
Yeah.
And it looks like you have created a brochure to do exactly that.
Yeah, one of the things I've been talking about, and many of my colleagues within Access have been doing, is doing bars within businesses. So actually doing, some businesses will bring in a massage therapist for the day, and actually going into corporations and running people's bars as a way to defend against burnout.
Which is smart. I actually had that idea years ago when I was working for a company. I was like, oh, we should bring a couple of you guys in to do this thing. That never happened for absurd reasons that are out of our control. But I think it's common sense. It's so smart to just be like, all right, everybody's high level stress, dealing with so much. What can we think of and do outside of the box other than giving everybody a week off?
Right. Well, I mean, isn't that it? Is really allowing people to have a space where they do when you have your bars run, your mind gets to kind of take a break. Yeah. It's relaxing. People have all sorts of different experiences. But it really, because it unlocks so much stress, anxiety, things like that, and actually allows that to dissipate, it can really be a huge, benefit to any business. So, I mean, that is something I'm working on also adding. And if anybody listening, has any businesses that would be interested, that would be amazing. Reach out. And I'm always creating. And so, I mean, that's, like you said, I mean, as far as personal stuff, I mean, I'm always working on different things about, just being in, just having a greater like communion with my husband, my kids, I mean, that whole world. And, I've certainly worked through a lot of stuff using all of this. I mean, a lot of my own insecurities, a lot of making people greater than me. I mean, a ton of anxiety. I mean, I can look at all the things that I've worked through that, you don't often know what you're working on. So you get to the other side of it. Right. And then you're like, oh man, like I had this whole thing and I totally got through that now.
That's interesting too that you said, because it's always, a lot of this is retrospect.
Yeah.
Where you're already through it and then you're like, oh, I just got through that thing I didn't even realize I was in.
Yeah, well, absolutely. 'Cause so much of what we're changing all the time are things that we've kept hidden from ourselves.
Yeah. Well, the subconscious is designed to protect us.
Right. And so, it's like when we're actually willing to get present with those things and have them show up, and it's really, if you ask, the universe for, something to move or change, sometimes it'll be really confronting because it'll show up.
Right.
But it shows up because now you have an opportunity to choose something different with it. And now you can get to the other side of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can look at so many things that have changed for me over the last few years. And things I'm continuing to move through and work through. And, it's always growth. I hope I never get to a point where I decide I'm done now.
That would be, it's insane to me to think that, like, life is constant evolution until you become the next part of it.
Right.
Like, it's insane to think at any point just being like, I'm done.
Right.
This is it forever.
Right. Absolutely.
Do you think there'll come a time, or is it even a goal, where you will do less psychology and more of the access consciousness?
It's so funny you bring that up, just because I was looking at it this morning.
Yeah.
As I was looking at like the energy, I do this a lot. I do sort of asks of the universe.
Sure.
And I was looking at it this morning, and I was like, is that something I desire, to stop doing therapy?
'Cause you enjoy therapy.
I do enjoy therapy. And so I looked at it for a minute, and I was like, okay, maybe I would stop. And I was like, would I though? and I've gone around with it. I think if anything, I would do less. I don't know that I'll, and this could change, ask me in 5 years. But, right now, I can't imagine not doing it at all. But I'm aware of a future where maybe, I mean, I love the one-on-one stuff of therapy. I think one of the things that's fun for me about therapy is that I get to introduce a lot of this stuff to people who would have never otherwise sought it out, found it. Yeah. So it's sort of this way of like introducing some of this energetic topics, into people's worlds where they wouldn't necessarily otherwise have it. And, when you do an access class, and you have a room full of people, I mean, it's like more people get the change in less time, which is also awesome. So, I mean, I don't think that there's like it's this or that.
Yeah.
I think it's really, I mean, there was a time that I really wanted to leave psychology, but what I've gotten to now is I just wanted to leave the way that it was being done in my world.
Right, yeah.
And now that I get to choose everything that I create, now I don't hate it anymore at all. Now I'm like, oh, this is so different because now I'm the creator of my life.
I think stereotypically people are like, at least when you think about it as an outsider, it's one thing.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then you can be like, oh, well, it can be whatever it needs to be.
Right.
Whatever somebody's willing to turn it into.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm excited because I love this, all of this. And I think we're still in its infant stage where it's just going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to change the world. And it's incredible to be at the ground level. I mean, I'm at the ground level because I'm way out of the community also. But I know that you're very involved and there's tons of stuff and movement happening. It's exciting. I'm very excited to see what's next. Again, I appreciate you so much for taking the time. Let's end it on that, man.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very grateful.
Well, love you, friend.
Love you too.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode. It means the absolute world to me. If you feel so inclined, please subscribe. It already meant the world to me that you listened to it, but that would be even double world. I don't know, but thank you so much. We'll see you next time.